Well, a very warm welcome to this meeting for Wednesday, 24th of March. And in accordance with Section 43 of the Local Government in Scotland Act 2003, the Provost has directed that this meeting will be conducted in such a manner as to allow remote attendance by elected members. In accordance with Section 50A of the Local Government Scotland Act 1973, the public are excluded from the meeting, as it is likely that if members of the public were present, there would be a real and substantial risk to public health due to infection or contamination with coronavirus. This meeting will be live streamed via the Council website. I now ask Mr. Moody to give us a sederant. Thank you, Mr. Moody.
Thank you, Provost. Provost Buchanan.
Present.
Deputy Provost Ritchie.
Present.
Councillor Aitchison.
Here.
Councillor Alexander. Here. Yep. Councillor Balfour.
Present.
Councillor Binney.
Present.
Councillor Bissett.
Present.
Councillor Black.
Present.
Councillor Blackwood.
Present.
Councillor Bowes.
Present.
Councillor Coleman.
Present.
Councillor Colley.
Present.
Councillor Coombs.
Here. Sorry, here.
Councillor Flynn.
He's here, eh?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yep, here.
Councillor Garner.
Here.
Councillor Goldie.
That's Zoom.
Councillor Grant.
Present.
Councillor Harris.
Present.
Councillor Hughes.
Present.
Councillor Kerr.
Present.
Councillor McHugh.
Present.
Councillor McCluckey.
Here.
Councillor Meiklejohn.
Present.
Councillor Monroe.
Present.
Councillor Murtagh.
And shot.
Councillor Nichol.
Present.
Councillor Nimmo.
Present.
Councillor Patrick.
Present.
Councillor Reid.
Present.
And Councillor Spears.
Present.
Thank you.
Okay, that takes us to item 2 on your agenda this morning. That's a declaration of interest, and just for clarity, I'll read this out. Members should declare any financial and non-financial interest they have in any item of business at the meeting, identifying the relevant agenda item and the nature of the interest. Have we any declarations of interest at this time? None recorded. None recorded. Okay, thank you. That takes us to item 3, which is the minutes and information bulletin. Now, this is a very large document, and if you have any questions related to any of the minutes or the information bulletin, if you could just refer us to the page. So we'll start off with item 3A, which minute of meeting of Falkirk Council held on the 2nd of December 2020. It's pages 3 to 11 on your volume. Have we any questions arising from that minute, or can we agree that minute? No questions?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much. That takes us to item 3B, minute of meeting of Falkirk Council held on the 20th of January 2021. It's pages 12 to 19. Is there any questions arising from that minute? Can we agree that minute?
Agreed.
Thank you very much.
Agreed.
That takes us to item 3C, minute of meeting of Falkirk Council held on the 24th of February 2021. It's pages 20 to 22. Is there any questions arising from that minute? None? Can we agree that minute?
Agreed.
Thank you. That takes us to item 3D, minute of meeting of Falkirk Council held on the 3rd of March 2021, and it's pages 23 to 25. Have we any questions arising from that minute? No questions. Can we agree that?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. That takes us now to item 3E, minute of meeting of Falkirk Council held on the 11th of March 2021, pages 26 to 42. Have we any questions arising from that minute? None. Can we agree that minute?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. That takes us on now to item 3F, volume of minutes, volume 3, 2020 to 21. Have we any questions arising from that volume of minutes? None? Can we agree that minute?
Agreed.
Thank you. That takes us to item 3G, information bulletin, volume 3, 2020 to 21. It's pages 43 to 46. Have we any questions arising from that? Councillor McCluckie, you could just give us the relevant page, sir.
Relevant pages 5 to 11, Provost, and all this fantastic work we're doing with Council Biodiversity and Falkirk Green Space. Fantastic, as I say, information there on this, and I'll get to my question. That I've been asking for information of this for 7 months, and never got any. All I've got is a link to some tree planting in Falkirk North and 7 month meetings and requests. And I even took the director's advice and contacted officers over a couple of weeks ago, and that must have been kicked into the long grass because I've not had a response. So I was wondering, is this Council of the Future because of this? When shadow portfolio holders doesn't get any information in relating to what they're supposed to be representing.
We'll get that question answered. Mr. Duff?
Thanks, Provost. I wasn't aware that there was information still outstanding for Councillor McCluckie, so I'm happy to pick up with him outside the meeting and address any information needs that he has.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Black, you got a question?
Yes, thank you, Provost. It was regarding the information bulletin, page 13 to 17, and it was just I've counted roughly 46 tenders there for the quick quotes, and out of that there's only around about 7 that are local, and I just wondered why that there's so few that are local, and I hope that because we're all talking about community wealth building and keeping money in a local economy, that could be improved on in the future.
Yeah, could Mr. Ritchie maybe come in this one? This has been a situation that's been spoken about for many years about local companies in the tendering process. Mr. Ritchie?
Yeah, thanks, Provost. Just to confirm that if we look at the list of awards under quick quotes, where available, a local company, at least one local company has been asked to tender. Due to the specialist nature of some work, then there's some works where there aren't any local companies who are able to tender. So just to give members a reassurance that we are asking local companies to tender where they have the capability of doing that, and we continue to do work along with Douglas's team in our procurement clinics on Help the Buyer in trying to encourage local companies to register not only for contracts with the council, but contracts with the wider Scottish Government, local government family. Hopefully that answers the question, Provost.
Councillor Grant, got a question? And
thank you, Provost. Could I ask a question for 19, please? It's development services and description of contracts. That is in accordance with the development services benchmark procedure. A single tender was invited. What I'm asking Provost, is why was there only a single tender invited there when you look through the paper? It's so many tenders, 5 tenders, 4 tenders. So why is there only one for this one? Because it brings me back to the one a fortnight ago with your good self, with the difference between the council and the private contractor. So could I get that one answered, please?
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ritchie again.
I'm wondering whether it's perhaps one for Douglas
Douglas, yeah.
to pick up rather than myself, Provost.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Yeah, Douglas, thank you.
I expect in this instance, Provost, that it relates to the specialist nature of the service, but I'll get that one checked out and come back to Councillor Grant.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Kerr, you had a question?
Thanks, Provost. Like Councillor McCluckie, the page 5 to 11 are very important for this council, where biodiversity report. But my first question is probably for Robert Naylor. The AstroTurf goals, I take it these are for schools, Robert? And page
Okay.
13.
Page 13. Mr. Naylor.
I would need to go and make inquiries about that, Councillor Kerr. I would imagine it would be, but I'll get back to you on that.
That's fine, Robert. It just seems a lot of money for AstroTurf goals if it's for one area. On the same page, Provost, for Douglas, on page 13, Slamanan bed lining. What is that?
Douglas.
Yeah, just looking at the list, Provost, I'll need to check on that one as well. It may relate to some works at the cemetery, but I'll check it out.
Thank you.
The next one is on page 15, Provost. That's for Douglas as well. Livestock fencing at Volcana. Have we got livestock or is...
Douglas.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. It may relate to a let of premises down there. I know there's a few fields that we have out on agricultural let, right. So it may relate to that. But again, I can check that out.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
And I did question the same as Councillor Grant regarding page 19. It seems a lot of 92 properties, £21,500 per property to re-roof and re-roof cast. It seems a lot. My last question, Provost, is on page 21 for the Bonnybridge area, 39 properties that are going to get insulation, cavity wall. My question is this funded by the Scottish Government? Because I know that used to be, and I don't know if it's still done because it's quite a lot of money, 34,000 per house.
Okay, we'll bring about yourself, Douglas, or Mr. Ritchie.
Probably one for Stuart. I don't know if Stuart, if you can come in on that one.
It's Scene Development Services on page 21.
Yeah, I'm happy to pick it up. Yeah, I'm happy to pick it up. Provost, Councillor Kerr is correct. There are some instances where government funding is available, so I need to go back and just double check as far as this particular contract. is concerned. So we can do that and come back to you offline.
That's fine, Stuart. Thank you very much. Thanks, Douglas, Stuart, and Provost. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Councillor Goldie's got his hand up. Question, sir, and page number. You're mute. Thank you. You're still mute, Councillor Goldie, sorry.
How's that?
That's
Can you
fine.
hear me now? Right, it's
Yeah,
not
you're
a
fine.
question, it's an observation on questions and responses. And it's not a criticism of officers, but it's a thing that's happened lately, more so since we've went online. It really isn't good enough for officers. And I know they're very, very busy, as I say. It's not a personal criticism of officers, but in a sense, you've got to say that when we're all together, that this is a full council meeting. And officers, when they're asked questions, give the honest answer and say, well, I haven't got the information, I'll get back to you offline. So that means that we've heard the question, but we're not getting the answer. And I think it's maybe something that officers should maybe concentrate more fully on in future and do what we all do and read the agenda and probably school themselves up better on what the answers to the questions are. I know it's a lot of work, but it's a council meeting after all.
Okay, thanks for your comments. Is there any other questions in relation to this? Councillor Reid? Right, Councillor Reid? Can you hear me, Councillor Reid?
Yes, I've got it now, Provost.
Have you got questions, sir?
I've got one question. It's in page 25.
Thank you.
It's the word of this contract for the pilot scheme for children at the edges of care. No problem with what's being recommended. It's a major step forward. Aberlour has been ensconced in Langleys for decades now. How does this particular scheme differ from the one that has existed or does exist?
Okay, I think we'll bring Mr. Naylor in to see if we can answer that. Mr. Naylor?
Thanks, Provost. Yeah, this is new and additional. It's a pilot project that we think will be of much benefit to Falkirk families. It's a project that Aberlour have run in some other areas of Scotland, and they invited Falkirk to join them to pilot the approach, knowing how it fits with our closer to home strategy. So Aberlour are funding 50% of the 12-month pilot, and it's called the Sustain Service, and it means that the service offers value for money with significant savings realised in other local authorities where the model has been piloted. The 50% match funding from the council comes from investment already committed to the Closer to Homes project within the medium-term financial plan. Young people aged 12 and over and families in crisis and at the edge of care will be referred for 24/7 support via the Children's Services Resource Group. This isn't a service that we currently offer, so it's a significant enhancement to our early intervention strategies, and we're hoping to support families so that they don't end up needing to be accommodated in future. As I say, it's a 12-month pilot, and I would anticipate there'll be a report back on the success of the pilot and next steps in due course.
Thank you, Mr. Naylor.
Thank you, Provost. Yes,
Okay.
a very good response. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much for that. Councillor Murtagh?
Yeah, I was picking up on the point that Councillor Goldie was made, and I suppose in terms of framing it as a question on the structure of how we do this with the minutes. Given that the purpose to sort of ask questions on the minute and to receive an answer, and that's completely an apolitical point of information, and we do all get that information back from officers in due course when it's circulated to us. So I just wanted to sort of say, well, if there's a need, I'm very new compared to other councillors, but I did feel that it was open to us as members in advance to provide officers with the questions that, even if we then want to ask it in public, I think that would probably be the best way that they are prepared with the answer for us all in some ways, in order that we can get that fullness of answer if that's what's required. And I suppose whether there's maybe I need to recirculate that procedure. I don't know if that's something, but I thought that we were all fairly well versed with asking questions in advance if that's what we need to get the answer in public.
Okay, thank you for that, for your
19-1
comments.
Provost, 19-1 Provost.
Yes.
I hear what the councillor said, but I'm knowing I don't have the gift of being able to guess what people are going to ask at a council meeting. So, I mean, I have no idea what people are going to ask. But it's just, I accept the point, but I think officers will accept mine as well. Thank you, Provost.
Okay, thank you. Now, this question, we've had two comments here, and quite rightly so, but our questions, we're still on this volume information bulletin. Is there any other questions in this, or can we agree? Can we agree? Thank you very much.
Agreed.
Great, thank you. Thank you, everybody. That now takes us to item 4 on your agenda this morning. It's the rolling action log, and it's pages 43 to 46, and we'll bring in Mr. Moody on this one. Thank you, Mr. Moody.
Yes, thank you, Provost. This is an item which appears on every agenda. It's for members to note, but it is an opportunity to ask questions on any of the items. But there should be comments updating and advising members on the progress of any items which aren't on timetable in terms of reporting back.
Okay, thanks for that, Mr. Moody. Have we any questions in relation to the rolling action log, or can we agree? Are we agreeing?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
Agreed.
That takes us to item 5 on your agenda this morning. It's the council service structure, and the report is by the Chief Executive, and it's pages 47 to 66. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Provost, and good morning, councillors. This report is about the review of the council service structure. There is quite a bit of detail in the report, so I'll endeavour to cover the key issues in my presentation of it. And before I start, this report is about structures, and it's about posts, and it's about process. So it is rightly in the public domain, but it's also clearly not appropriate to discuss individual circumstances in that context. The starting point for this work really are the lessons from the COVID pandemic, our response to it, our plans for recovery, the new corporate plan and business plan agreed by the council, and the new priorities around communities, enterprise and innovation. Such changes and developments bring new challenges, and it is apposite now to consider whether we are making the best use of the financial and employee resources that we have, with the aim of ensuring the successful delivery of our priorities. So this report sets out changes which are being made to our service structure to accommodate this, and it also makes recommendations on further changes to support a refreshed way of delivering on our priorities. It's set out in 3 clear phases. The first, dealing with moves within services. The second, to reintegrate the services provided by Falkirk Community Trust. And the third, dealing with 3 specific proposed moves between services. I will go through these in turn in relation to each of the council services and return to the recommendations at the end. So over the past year, the council has significantly adapted its service delivery to respond to a number of challenges as a result of the COVID pandemic. As part of our recovery process, we must continue to provide the support needed by our communities, particularly the most vulnerable in our communities, and by our local businesses. At the same time, we were experiencing very significant financial challenges, as councillors are well aware, both now and for the foreseeable future. But our new corporate plan and business plan and priorities provide a good foundation for our work over the next few years. They must also enable a more fundamental approach by the council towards placemaking, reflecting the importance of the climate change agenda, the need for economic recovery post-pandemic, the promotion of the place principle, and recognising the Council's investment plans for its communities, which must reflect their diverse ambitions and needs. So solutions do need to be local in that regard. We also need to build on the innovative practices in relation to IT and digital and flexible working. And importantly, we must ensure that there is capacity within the service structure at the right levels and in the right posts to deliver the significant programme of change required over the next 5 years and more. As members are aware, the Director of Development Services retired from the Council on the 30th of August last year. As members were advised at the time, I arranged for an acting director appointment to be made to that post for a number of clearly set out reasons. These interim arrangements are due to end at the end of March, so it is timely in that regard for our service structure to be reviewed prior to making a new director level appointment. In addition, in January of this year, the Council took a decision to bring Falkirk Community Trust back in-house. I have delayed submission of this report on our service structure until that decision had been taken. This has enabled an initial consideration of the impact of that decision in relation to the Trust when reviewing our service structure. So whilst any final decision on the position of Trust functions within our structure must be subject to consultation with the Trust, it's important that we have a basis on which to approach the Trust to commence such discussions. So a significant time of change across the Council, considerable financial challenges, a need to deliver on our priorities to meet the needs of our communities and local businesses, and also a need to have a culture that reflects that ambition, a one Council approach, and a structure that provides the best support for achieving these objectives. And whilst the structure in itself is never the full answer to the kind of challenges we face, it is important that we have the appropriate leadership and management support in place at all levels. So, Provost, there are a series of factors which lie behind this review and the timing of it and the timing of this report. For members' information, the current functional structure for all services and for social work adult services within the Health and Social Care Partnership is provided at Appendix 1. To undertake this review process, I've held a number of meetings with directors to review the options available to us. We've looked at issues around about recovery and priorities and operational arrangements and the significant changes and issues we need to take forward. And that's all been considered as part of the process leading to this report. I've also had discussions with the group leaders to ensure they had an opportunity to consider the options prior to proposals being presented to members. Having considered the various options available, I've developed the revised structure which you see at Appendix 2 to the report. And you will note that all of the proposed changes within or between services are highlighted, and I intend to go through these in turn, moving left to right across that structure diagram, and then picking up separately on issues relating to the Community Trust. So starting with what I'm calling the Place Directorate, we all know that Falkirk is entering a major period of transition from investment plans. These relate to climate change and flood risk, the investment zone, new infrastructure, outcomes from the Strategic Property Review, the new Council HQ and Arts Centre, amongst others. And it is important that this investment proceeds in a way that enhances the quality of place, reflects fully the needs and ambitions of our communities, and is delivered efficiently and effectively. And development services has been and will be at the forefront of this programme. And the functional structure of development services has adapted over the years to accommodate various and varying service pressures. The service is, however, now entering a major transition phase, and these pressures must be managed to sustain service standards and delivery whilst preparing to deliver the major investment programmes. I'm also suggesting that the service is renamed to Place Services. This better reflects the purpose of the service within a more forward-looking council and its commitment to enhancing the quality of place for our communities, reflecting the place principle, concepts such as the 20-minute neighbourhood and the needs of local communities. So the changes set out in Appendix 2 aim to better align functions, avoid duplication, and ensure a structure that is more attuned to the needs of our communities, businesses, and partners. As currently, there are three divisions. The first of these is Growth, Infrastructure, and Climate. This brings together property-related functions from across the service into a single division to achieve a corporate approach to the management of property in line with the SPR. It is at the heart of our economic recovery work, bringing together economic development and planning, business support, the corporate landlord function, tourism, employability, transport, and climate change, working together to support and enhance the quality of place. In phase 3 of the proposals, there is one service structure change linked to this division, which does require member approval. And that is the transfer of the management of school assets and other property management functions, which currently sit within Children's Services. And the aim of this is to ensure that all decisions on the future property requirements for the council are being considered within a single team. Given the range of work of the Growth, Infrastructure and Climate Division, it is appropriate that it leads on the enterprise priority within the corporate plan. This priority focuses on the work we need to do to help businesses thrive and make Falkirk more prosperous. The next division to which I've agreed changes with the directors is Environment and Operations division, which brings together roads, grounds maintenance, waste, street cleansing, and fleet, reflecting the high degrees of synergy in terms of workforce, in terms of delivery, and in terms of quality standards. This division also includes environmental health and trading standards, functions which align with the front-facing nature of the work of this division. As part of phase 3, I am also proposing that the property repairs function moves to this division. This ensures that all direct service delivery functions, which do not sit within education or social work, are delivered within a single division. Integration within one division will enable such functions to be further developed, adopting a more entrepreneurial approach. Members will note at paragraph 4.16 that I'm proposing that the transfer of property repairs is done on a phased basis. Initially, this function will move to the Housing and Communities division within Corporate and Housing Services. This will allow for a period of implementation of the changes, the initial changes proposed within the Place Directorate. This is also linked to the transfer of the non-education CLD functions to corporate and housing, because both changes must be agreed for this to work in practice. Members will also note that as we go forward, that I will take a role in the management of the resilience function. This is appropriate given that I am the Council's representative on the Regional Resilience Partnership, and indeed it is normal practice for a Chief Executive to assume such responsibility. And I want to turn to the proposed Invest Falkirk division. I've already spoken about the range of investment programmes in Falkirk in future years, and these are listed more fully in paragraph 418. The scale of these projects is significant, with the potential collective value up to £1 billion, as are the benefits and positive impact they can have in placemaking for our communities. Stimulating job creation, economic recovery, attracting new business and investment, improving infrastructure, having a positive impact on the safety and well-being of communities, and a positive impact in terms of our climate change agenda, as well as supporting increased tourism. The Invest Falkirk division will focus on delivering these projects and increasing the pace of change. And we will ensure that appropriate skills are in place at the right time as each project requires. It will enable the synergies between projects to be better aligned. Members will note the supplementary information included at Appendix 3. Recognising the different phases of each of these projects, it is important for the Invest Falkirk division to have a flexible workforce. This ensures appropriate professional and technical skills are available at the appropriate stages of each project. Very strong project management skills will clearly be a prerequisite, and there'll be strong links to the Council of the Future Transformation Change Programme and our existing PMO team. The division will either scale up or scale down depending on the overarching requirements of the projects within the confines of the establishment and the budget for the division. Secondment and the appointment of temporary officers are both likely to be features of this flexibility which is required. Turning to corporate and housing, members will note from Appendix 2 that I have agreed with directors to move the functions of the current procurement and housing property division. Procurement will become part of the governance division, and this is appropriate given the input, experience and skills the governance division already has on procurement matters. There is one exception to this, and that is the proposal that the central matching and commissioning teams, which undertake work solely for adult social care, will move into the Health and Social Care Partnership. This has already been agreed with the Health and Social Care Partnership Chief Officer and is included amongst the recommendations today. A key part of this service is, of course, the Housing and Communities Division. This division will lead on the communities priority within the corporate plan and is taking forward critical initiatives such as community choices. To strengthen the communities function, I am proposing that CLD transfers to the Housing and Communities Division, the exception to this being the officers who provide support directly to schools. This should take place ideally once the property repairs function has moved on from the Housing and Communities function. It'll be there on a temporary basis as part of phase 1, but will transfer to place on a permanent basis as part of phase 3 if that is proposed, agreed by members today. As part of phase 1, the other element of the procurement and housing property division, so housing stock and estates management function and the housing investment and standards functions, will also move to the Housing and Communities Division. Finally, under the Corporate and Housing Directorate, it is the People, Technology and Transformation Division which will provide the leadership on the innovation priority within the corporate and business plans. Turning to children's services, the key responsibilities of education and children's services remain broadly unchanged at the current time. The two exceptions sit within phase 3 of the process that I've touched on earlier in the report. So that is the transfer of non-education related CLD work into housing and communities. And the second change is the transfer of the school asset and property management functions to the Growth, Infrastructure and Climate Change Division. Provost, I want to turn to issues relating to Falkirk Community Trust, which flow from the decision taken by members in January of this year to bring services back in-house. I think it is important we do not simply bring this back in-house and bolt it onto one of our existing services without a broader consideration of how it is most appropriately aligned. I'm also of the view that the range and scope of services provided by the Trust are not of sufficient scale to warrant a separate directorate. In coming to a final decision on the alignment of the functions in the Trust, it is important that the Council takes time to better understand the complexities and issues associated with this. And to do this, discussion and consultation will be taking place with Trust colleagues. To support and enable these discussions, I have considered together with directors how the Trust functions could potentially be integrated within the service structure. And the proposal is that culture, arts, museums and parks, given the links with tourism and the development of our local economy, may logically sit within growth, infrastructure and climate. That libraries, because of their critical community role, would sit with housing and communities. And that sport and leisure would sit with schools in the context of the SPR and a schools-led model of provision. However, I would stress that these are initial proposals and consultation with the Trust must follow, and that will no doubt also take account of existing synergies between the various functions in the Trust. So this is coming to members for agreement that this option is used as a basis for consultation to commence consultation with the Trust. The outcome of this and the recommended way in which to integrate Trust functions within the Council structure will be shared with members as part of the Trust report, which I have undertaken to submit to the Council in June of 2021. Provost, that covers the key service changes, but I'd like to touch on a couple of other aspects in the report very briefly. Firstly, the issue of leadership for transformational change. It is clearly necessary that the Council has the appropriate leadership in the right places to deliver on its ambitions and priorities as we go through a period of significant transformational change. We need the right leadership to drive this forward, increasing the pace of change and ensuring that we are as ambitious as we can be in delivering for our communities across Falkirk. This must be backed up with having the right people in the right roles across the Council. Work is already underway to ensure we appropriately resource our change projects at the right levels following the recent Council decision to support and invest in the Council of the Future programme. And directors will also consider their operational management arrangements, which sit below Chief Officer level across their services to ensure that these remain fit for purpose. Culture change must also be at the heart of this, and that will be another important consideration as we develop new teams. The timeline for implementation is set out in detail at paragraph 436 of the report. So to reiterate, phase 1 relates to changes within existing services, with the one exception of the moves to the Health and Social Care Partnership. The aim is to implement by June 2021 as set out in detail at 436. Phase 2 involves the integration of Community Trust by March 22, and phase 3 is longer term and moves some functions from one service to another as previously detailed, and the aim is to do that by December 2022. Workforce considerations are set out from paragraph 437, and specifically at paragraph 439, it's pointed out that for chief officers, there are a number of potentially significant changes, with some assuming a different range of responsibilities. If the proposals today are agreed, the job descriptions and grades for chief officers will require to be reviewed to ensure these reflect the new structure arrangements. And it is essential that the Council ensures its pay structures are kept under review to meet legislative requirements such as equal pay. So a review will be undertaken to take account of these changes in job remits and any that arise from the service structure to ensure the Council continues to have a robust and auditable pay structure. Section 5 sets out a brief summary of consultation undertaken to date and the further consultation that will take place subject to today's decisions. Section 6 sets out the changes to posts and the financial implications, and based on these changes, the savings achieved over 5 years, net of associated costs for early retirement, is 275,000. This figure excludes any costs arising from the required review of the Chief Officer pay structure. Also excluded from this figure are any savings which may be achieved from the integration of the Community Trust back into the council structure. But as set out in the report that members considered in January, there is an expectation that savings can be made in that area. And I would also specifically draw members' attention to the section on risk. So at this point, Provost, I'll return to the recommendations at section 2. Council is asked to note the arrangements to reprofile the divisions within development services and corporate and housing as part of phase 1, to note the creation of the Invest Falkirk division, to agree the transfer of the commissioning and central matching teams to the Health and Social Care Partnership, again as part of phase 1, to agree the change in title of development services to place services, to agree the proposed cross-service changes set out in Appendix 2, which will be implemented as part of phase 3, to agree that the suggested alignment of the functions of the Community Trust within the service structure be used as a basis for consultation with the Trust, to note that subject to the changes to the structure being agreed, further consultation will take place with employees, and the feedback from this will be discussed as appropriate with group leaders and trade unions. To agree to, in order to ensure the maintenance of equal pay, that the Chief Officer pay structure and grades will be reviewed as set out. To note the proposed timelines as set out in paragraph 436. To delegate powers to the Appointments Committee to make an appointment to the post of Director of Place, assuming that change of name is approved, and any resulting Chief Officer vacancies following appropriate slotting and matching arrangements. And finally, to note that the current arrangements regarding the interim acting Director of Development will continue until an appointment is made to the new Director position. So with apologies for the length of that, Provost, happy to take any questions, and Karen Algie will support me in dealing with that. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lawrie, for your fulsome report, which is significant with the amount of changes in the service structure that are proposed. I'm going straight to the Leader of the Council, Councillor Meikle-John, on this.
Thank you, Provost. And you'll be glad to know that I'm not going to go through in any great detail compared to Mr. Lawrie, but I do thank him for taking the time to do that, and thank both Kenneth and Karen for coming along, certainly to my group meeting, and I know they did to others, to talk about this in more detail. Often as elected members we get quite ingrained in the operational aspects of the council, and forget about the strategic nature of things, and I think it's important that we do focus on the strategic nature of our structure going forward to ensure it is fit for purpose. Falkirk Council's had a very traditional structure, which was an overhang from the District Council and Regional Council days, and we've kind of maintained that, and now that our transformational programme has progressed, then we need to just reflect on how fit for purpose it is. And in the light of the last year, I also don't think there'll be any organisation, public or otherwise, that will not be looking at how they're set up, how they're structured and how they're functioning as a result of the pandemic, and take into account the changes and the lessons learned we've had from over the last year and reflect that. And we have a good opportunity to actually do that here. We know that we are moving in different ways to working. We're physically going to move out of our traditional municipal buildings base, and you know, there's a need to make sure that the rest of the council is aligned with what it is we're trying to do and our vision. We reviewed our council priorities, and there was a number of comments from our constituents or our citizens in relation to that, and that was about us being more fleet of foot, having to make decisions better, and being able to actually just get on with the tasks in front of us, because the communities want to see difference, and I think that will become more evident as we go through, particularly in the next year, as we emerge post-pandemic into the recovery. We've got clear areas of development around economic recovery and climate change, and indeed our relationship with our communities. So we do need to modernise and we do need to transform, and this programme will help as our organisation to be able to do that. That's not saying that there won't come with some concerns and anxieties. I think many members will have, but I also think our staff will have. Therefore, pace of change is going to be very critical in this, to be able to get the optimum that we do move forward, but it's done in a way that is managed and is a positive experience, particularly for our staff, and the outcomes that we then get from that. I think it's important that we look to augment the areas where the greatest work is going to be required right now, and what was development services and what's been proposed as place has the bulk of the work that needs to be done in a practical nature, as well as in that strategic development. £1 million worth of £1 billion worth of projects that will be needed to taking forward to actually help need that recovery, and we'll take a dedicated team. Therefore, having a dedicated project management team within the service will be able to be realised. And while we have some huge projects that are 10 years or more, I am sure there are others that will come in the back of that, and therefore being able to pull in the expertise from the rest of the council into that to be able to live in that is going to be quite critical there. And reorganisation of other functions within that sector will hopefully improve and create more joined up working. It will affect better outcomes and better efficiencies, and those synergies between the services be able to be developed. I have to say that when Kenneth brought this forward as a suggestion as to how to reorganise, one of the areas that was a cause for concern was moving of housing repairs. However, having had a number of discussions, I'm a bit more comfortable that that could be of a benefit in moving into our place section, bringing that function together, just because of the better communications that could be brought from that, and therefore the better outcomes that can be effective for our tenants going forward. And I know that has been discussed with many managers at senior level and the trade unions, and there is nothing being flagged up as being an area of concern, which is good to know. And I have no doubt that there will be issues in the practicalities of the move, but as that is going to be probably the final phase, there's plenty of opportunity to be able to work through those with management and unions as required. The trust, we've made a decision that the Falkirk Community Trust has been brought back in-house. That decision's made, therefore we have to look at how that can be integrated within the council. As Kenneth said, that bringing it back in as a single entity is not something that we can do, otherwise there would be no point of making the change in the first place. What we have before us again is a suggestion of where the various functions may sit. That is still going to be subject to further consultation, and that to happen over the next few months, with a report coming back in June. Therefore, while we have proposals at this moment, that may not be the final proposals, the outcome of that discussion that needs to be had. The movement of procurement aspects of health and social care makes perfect sense. They should have responsibility for this, and it will certainly need them to continue to develop their business plan and transformation agenda and going forward, and be able to redesign services in a more streamlined way. So those particular changes make perfect sense. The moving of our non-educational CLD section into the communities team. Again, we have seen, and we just had the report yesterday on the depth and the breadth of the work that was done by that team over the last year, and aligning them with the communities to be able to continue that work in a very much a joined up way, to empower our communities, along with the community conversations, along with our community choices, will actually enable a better synergy to bring all the skills together. And that is one that I think could perhaps happen a little earlier than was planned. But again, it's all about the pace of change and taking people with them. We've got the assurance that as the job roles are changed, that regrading will take place. Therefore, people will get paid and remunerated accordingly for any new roles that they take on, and that should be able to be delivered within the current budget envelope. And that's something that I think it's important that we're able to articulate to staff. But I do think we need to modernise, we need to make sure that our services and directorates are aligned with the council priorities. And while not everything may be as we would want it immediately, I'm sure that as we go through the various phases, which is over 18 months to almost 2 years, then we will be a much slicker organisation. We will be more responsive to our communities, and we will be more efficient in going forward. On that, I will move the recommendations as per in section 2 of the report. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you. Have we got a seconder?
Councillor Gardner, Provost.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Provost. And between the council leader and the chief exec, I think we'll all agree I've pretty much covered everything there. She did mention being fleet of foot and getting on with things, and I think that is something we need to do here. An extremely important facet of this report is the consultation with employees and the trade unions going forward, and it's imperative this is carried out fully. I'm happy to second the report reserving the right, Provost.
Okay, thank you, sir. I'll go to Councillor Bissett.
Thank you, Provost. It has been said that the only thing constant is change, and we don't disagree that change needs to happen, given and especially within the current pandemic, and the phrase often used is we need to build back better, and certainly the restructure covers that. That's not the issue I want to raise. I think what I want to raise is that the group leaders, certainly speaking for myself, you're presented with a schematic of the changes, and it's quite a complex schematic, and there's been a lot of work leading up to that, and you're presented with that and asked what your comments are just within a very short meeting, and you can't take that back to your group because it's confidential, because there's ongoing discussions with the employees and trade unions. So last week, I think it was Wednesday, we were presented with that 18-page report, which Kenneth went into detail there, and so you can quite clearly see how complex a document it is. And then we very hastily had to organise a briefing on the Friday for the Labour Group members to discuss this. And here we are at a council meeting today, being asked to make a decision on it. Now, for me, this is such a complex transformation within the council. and it deserves closer scrutiny. And we need to be open and transparent with the public and the employees, and we would like to have further time to discuss this, Provost. So we don't disagree that the change needs to come, but I think it's the way it's been handled in the very short notice and not having the time to discuss it in detail. There's a lot in the report and there's a lot more to discuss. So I'm going to formally move an amendment, Provost, that we continue this till the next council meeting in May. Thank you, Provost.
Have you got a seconder, Councillor Bissett?
Provost, Councillor
Yes.
Coombs.
Yep.
Again, on the back of what Councillor Bissett said there, to get this report, it was my first sight of any of this last Wednesday. And much as the members of the public might think so, we do actually have more than one report to read in a week. In the 9 years since I've been a councillor, every single year there's been cuts. And of course, we're not calling this a cut. But if it's not saving money, well, it is. It's saving a whole directorate of the trust. As far as I'm concerned, the services are already under pressure. And I'm extremely concerned about the scale of responsibilities within these new roles. I mean, it's absolutely excessive. And I think that, as we know, our senior officers work extremely hard as it is, and the numbers are dwindling year on year. I don't want to go into the minutiae of it, but obviously my interpretation of it is somewhat different to the Chief Executive. And the integration of the trust, as the council leader has just said, the decision was taken in January, and obviously members of this council and members of the public know fine well what my thoughts were about that. I don't think that throwing £1 million away is in any way progressive. And you can use all the positive words you want to describe this restructuring, but that's basically what it is. It's trying to absolve the fact that we've wasted all that money on paying a rates bill that wasn't necessary. One thing that I don't understand is, and a question I think probably for the Chief Executive, is the Invest Falkirk is going to be funded by capital projects, as far as I can see. And please excuse me if I haven't got a clear understanding of this, but as I've said, first I saw of it was last week. But if this is going to be funded by capital, then why is there a need to reduce the heads of service? Because if we accept that the new one, I can't even remember what it's called, the Invest Falkirk division is all funded from capital projects, then we're reducing the existing heads of service within the old development service and the new police service from 3 to 2, whilst also absorbing extra responsibilities on the trust. So could somebody explain that to me, if it's going to be, well, as I say, capital funded?
Mr. Laurie, can you come in on that?
Yes, thank you, Provost. The suggestion is not that the Invest Falkirk division will be entirely funded by capital. What there will be is the opportunity to charge fees against capital expenditure in terms of the nature of the work that's been taken forward. But what we'll need to create is a team, the division, from within the existing resources. So, as I said, at the beginning, there were 3 heads of service in development. There are proposed 3 heads of service in place, and the Invest Falkirk division will be established within the current budget available, but will clearly have regard to both the attraction of external funding income, but also the fees charged against capital expenditure. But it is not the case that it's entirely funded by capital.
Okay, so that brings me back to my original question. So, okay, if it's not entirely, but majorly covered by external funding and the other projects for capital, then we're adding more responsibilities and cutting heads of service. I just think that the risk involved here is that we're making these departments so large and diverse, as I say, considering the scale of the responsibility within these new roles. I still don't understand. I appreciate your answer, and as you know, I did write to you over the weekend with some of these questions, but obviously I didn't share that with the full council. But let's see. I was trying to get up the questions that I had actually written to you there. But the other one of my concerns that I wrote to you about was about to confirm that there would be no additional substantial costs involved in this restructure. And I appreciate that you did reply to me yesterday, but I wasn't clear about the answer there because of the risks, as I say, because of all these additional responsibilities. And I appreciate that the unions are still in negotiations. But if someone else says, I'm not happy about these changes to my job, I would like severance to go, surely that has to be taken into consideration.
Mr. Laurie, will you come back on that one?
Yes, I mean, in terms of the potential additional costs, and you're right to identify that because of the changes in the scale of some of these roles, that's why we need to look at the job descriptions and grades as set out at paragraph 439. So that was the potential costs that I was referring to in that context. But just on the point of voluntary severance or early retirement, that isn't something which is simply open to individuals on an ongoing basis. What we will do in relation to the structure is the chief officers will either stay in their substantive roles, or they will be slotted into the relevant post within the structure. But there won't be any further voluntary severances arising from this structure, because the only voluntary severance which is being taken forward is because of the deletion of a post, and there is only one fewer post in the new structure from the previous structure. So the question of additional voluntary severances does not arise, though clearly chief officers, as with any other officers, may choose to leave the council at any given time, and if that were the case, we would need to recruit into vacant positions.
Okay. That's more or less what you wrote back to me. And as I say, I'm obviously missing something somewhere. Is there a straight yes or no that you can confirm that there's no additional substantial costs? I don't talk about advertising the new posts or anything like that. That wasn't the type of posts I was talking about. So there's no going to be, as far as you're concerned, there will be no additional substantial costs involved in this restructure.
Well, aside from these minor costs you referred to, Councillor Coombs, the only other additional costs...
You referred to it, it wasn't me. You referred to it in your response to me.
Yes, apologies. Provost, the only additional costs are those potentially aligned with the process set out at 439 in terms of the review of job descriptions and grades in the context of the restructuring.
Okay. Okay.
Sorry, Provost, can I continue?
Yep.
The chief executive said that we did need time to look at this, and council needed to understand. But the reason that we're moving for continuation is, I think, again, that the level of risk involved in the loss of management here The council leader referred to recovery from the pandemic, but surely if we're going through a major restructure in the council, then the focus will move to the restructure rather than to the recovery from the COVID pandemic. I think that staff and members need to be reassured that this will work in practice. I mean, as we know, there's lots of things that sound great in planning circumstances and in the initial stages, but in practice, I certainly don't feel confident that all of these changes at that time are going to be good for this council or this area. The chief executive mentioned about bolting on the trust services, and also mentioned the savings of integrating the trust in the January report. The report that I read in January quite clearly said that there would be a £1.1 million deficit. The savings of duplication was mentioned, were absolutely minuscule compared to the loss that's going to be made to this council. And I think the public need to be aware that moving the trust will cost that money year on year on year. Maybe that's why we're having to have a restructure to try and make up for those losses that council agreed to in January. And I think that moving sport and leisure into education, I do hope that the public see that for what it is. It's what I said in January. It's speeding up the closure of trust facilities. As a non-statutory service, trust within the very regulated and protected service of education will of course be the poor relation. And it makes sense if the only swimming pools and football pitches that our residents want to attend are within their local school. And I do hope the people of Bo'ness are watching here. The chief executive also stated that the council needs to take time to understand this. Well, I think that's ironic given that, as I said, I personally have only had 6 days. I spent my whole weekend trying to get my head around this, and I came to the conclusion that the risk far outweighs the benefits at this moment. I'm not saying that change isn't needed, but sometimes it just feels like we're shuffling the deck chairs here on the Titanic. I think that what our amendment is asking for is to allow exactly what the chief exec said, time to understand. We also need time for the members of this council to consider the potential implications that are being raised here. We need time for the unions to talk to staff, and we need time for our residents to be able to understand it, because as the council leader just said, this is about, if we're talking community empowerment and community conversations, I think this itself, this report, needs a lot of community conversations. And I think we'd be putting the cart before the horse if we agree it today and then ask everybody, well, what is it you think about it? Because it's already a done deal. I second the amendment.
Okay.
Provost, thank you.
Thank you very much. Just to clarify the position we're at the moment is we have a motion moved and seconded to agree the recommendations. We've got an amendment moved and seconded to continue this, to allow everybody more time to go into depth in these major changes. I'm going to go back first of all to Councillor Meikle-John. Councillor Meikle-John, you've heard the amendment that's came forward. It doesn't seem unreasonable to me. Do you want to take time, maybe your group, for 5 or 10 minutes to discuss whether you would agree to this continuation to allow for more information and more discussion on these particular changes?
Provost, I'm content that we just move on the debate, and I'll reserve my comments for summing up in relation to the debate. I think time is critical. Delaying this for another month just creates even more uncertainty. And there's a number of things that we need to be getting on and doing. So I don't see the delay is going to benefit the council at all.
Okay, thank you very much for that. But what we'll do is at this stage, we'll have a comfort break, 5 minutes for a comfort break for everybody. Thank you very much. And we'll reconvene. Just to clarify exactly the position we're in at the moment, we have a motion to agree the recommendation, moved and seconded, and we have an amendment coming from the Labour group, moved and seconded, to continue. I'm now going to go to Councillor Kerr in relation to his group to find out whether he's got a supplementary agenda or not. Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, Provost. I'd like to thank Kenneth, the Chief Executive, and Karen for their support at our group meeting to discuss this report. Like today, went in depth and it gives a better understanding of what the report meant. There are many changes in this report, with some being brought in at a phased programme, which I think is the right idea, Provost. It's imperative that we get the right people and the experience in the right areas. Also, that if required, we give the encouragement and support to these people. There are challenging times ahead for all councils, whether it be financial or the way that we work forward. But having the right people in the right places will help with this transformation. And it's not always about working harder, Provost. Sometimes it's about working smarter. We haven't got any other amendment, Provost, and I thank you for allowing me to speak.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Now go to open the debate up. Councillor Alexander had his hand up first. Councillor Alexander.
Sorry, Provost. Councillor Alexander's had to take an urgent phone call.
No problem.
You maybe just move on and maybe come back to him.
Okay, we'll move on. Is there anybody else want to come in to the debate or ask any questions of our Chief Executive or officers?
Provost, can I just come in for a quick question?
That's fine. I've got carry on, Councillor Bissett and then Councillor Nimmo.
I'd just like to say that perhaps in the spirit of kind of cooperation and collaboration, if you like, might it be an idea to call a special council meeting sort of early April, if you like? That would be a bit of a compromise rather than going till May. So we still got time to discuss it, and we might end up at the same outcome, you know. But I think we've where we would agree it, but we need that time to discuss it, I believe. I mean, there are massive changes here, and I think it really does deserve a level of scrutiny. It really was short notice, and I don't think it's unjust to ask for this. So that would be my offer, Provost.
Okay, so we just clarify that again. Your amendment was for a continuation to the next meeting of the council, which would be when, Mr. Moody?
Provost, it's currently scheduled for the 5th of May, but you'll see there's an item later in the agenda which asks for that date to be moved back almost 2 weeks. So it would be in the middle of May if that recommendation is agreed.
So it would be the middle of May before the next full council meeting. Would that give you appropriate time?
Yeah, I see that might be too far away. So my proposal is, and I take on board what the leader's saying, that we want to get moving with these things. So in the spirit of kind of compromise, could we possibly have a special council meeting in April? So we've got time to discuss this in detail, and we can come back to it with a kind of more clarity.
Okay, I'm going to take some legal advice on that suggestion. Mr. Moody, you've heard Councillor Bissett's suggestion.
Provost, it's always open to the council to continue the matter to a date to be determined and to set the time frame for that, and the meeting would then be arranged in consultation with yourself, Provost.
What would be the situation that there's already been amendment moved for continuation to the next full council meeting?
Provost, the current situation is that the amendment is to continue to the next ordinary meeting, which is the meeting in May. There are provisions in the standing orders which allow for amendments to be altered, but I think what Councillor Bissett is saying he would agree to seek to change his amendment if that was agreeable to the other groups in the council.
Would you need a seconder for that one?
We would need the agreement of the seconder, Provost.
Yeah, I'll go to a seconder. Councillor Coombs, would you agree to that?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I understand that the council leader didn't agree to moving it to May because she's obviously had previous sight of this. I think, being fair, members needed more than 1 week to look, read, understand the implications of this.
Okay, thank you. So we'll have agreement, Councillor Moody and Mr. Moody.
No, I think all that Councillor Coombs is saying, she would be agreeable to altering the amendment in the event that there was agreement to that by the leader of the council.
Okay. Well, I think we'll go back to the leader of the council then. She's been listening to this.
Thank you, Provost. I mean, firstly, can I say I've had no more sight than the other group leaders in that respect. The discussions that Kenneth has been with all three of us in relation to the structures. What I do know is that services are crying out for this change, for this movement to happen, and particularly within our development services. They are struggling for resources. They need to be progressing things very quickly in order to be able to get our major projects on plan, and that is all related to our recovery. Therefore, I really do think that this continually delaying tactic is not helpful. I think Mr. Laurie has been more than generous in bringing forward as much information as he's had, as he didn't have to bring that forward. A lot of the internal reorganisation could have happened without coming in front of members. So I do believe that this is critical to our recovery, and at this particular juncture we need to be getting on with things. I'm not keen to have a delay. I think we need to give a bit of certainty to the staff and to our public that we are going to be a responsible and reactive council and move ahead. So I'm not for taking this to a further step in April.
Provost, it's certainly not a delaying tactic. Nothing could be further from the truth. It really is just, it is a point that we really feel we need to discuss this further. And I think the public would expect that, probably.
Yeah. Okay, then we're going to open up. We're going to open up the debate now. Councillor Alexander, you had your hand up first. You're mute, Councillor Alexander.
I wasn't aware I had my hand up first, but I'm quite happy to go first. The three group leaders are in an extremely privileged position with regards to their access to information. Compared to previous group leaders, particularly opposition members in the previous administrations. Because there's so much happens with the group, with the three group leaders and the relevant officers. So much information is shared, whereas before it was 3 days notice. You know, it's 3 days notice, not 5, but 3 until the last review of standing orders. So there's something doesn't seem to be right with the Labour group in terms of grasping the opportunity that this particular structure would actually give to them and to the council. For example, the issue of the structure within Falkirk Council, of course, it's going to be perceived as a stalling tactic, because a major issue is going through Falkirk Council has been subject to that same stalling tactic. And you know, that's a great pity, because if Mrs. Meikle-John is anything, she's honest, and she has said that she will open up the council to yourselves and to the Conservatives and to the Independents accordingly. And she's stuck to that, despite the fact that games have been played from time to time. Perhaps not as much as in the past, but the games nevertheless. So what we have is a situation whereby we have a structure that the Labour Group leader has praised in terms of the proposals, praised in terms of the detail, although the detail, in fairness, was a wee bit short. And then at the end of that, there was the obligatory delaying tactic. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, and I stand corrected if I'm wrong, but I would hazard a guess that Mrs. Coombs' 100% negativity will win the day within the Labour group. And also, that I do believe that her comments in relation to in relation to the first, this is again this is an attempt to delay a decision being taken by the trust, and therefore delay the process of integration. But I appreciate the fact that Labour are opposed to the integration of the trust to mainstream council services. But as has already been stated, the decision's already been taken, and so we need to move on from there. I therefore hope that the issues that are before us are resolved, and we can move on from there. Thank you very much, Provost.
Thank you very much. Councillor Coombs, you have 19-1.
Thanks, Provost. Councillor Alexander said that this is a delaying tactic. It is absolutely not a delaying tactic. This is about openness and transparency. I understand the way democracy works and that the trust is coming back in-house. But I don't think it's fair that we hide these details from the public or from members.
Councillor Coombs, can I say this and say this to everybody? Everybody's entitled to their opinion. As long as you're not disrespectful and name people, if you can get the quotes right in terms of the 19-1, Councillor Alexander is only doing his opinion. He's not been disrespectful to your good self. Right, it's Councillor Blackwood next, and then Councillor Nimmo, unless we have somebody for any of the other groups, and we're trying to do it a fair way going across the board. So, Councillor Blackwood.
Thanks, Provost. Provost, on the consultation process, it's supposed to have so far taken forward the trade unions. 4.3, I accept that they have spoken to the trade union reps. They've showed no immediate concern or objections, but reserved the right to come back. And at 4.41, should any feedback of significant impacts on implications that the trade union and group leaders would reach an agreement, would try to reach an agreed way forward. Now, this is like putting the cat, as somebody said, putting the cart before the horse. The trade unions haven't beaten their members yet. In fact, I believe the reps are only meeting this afternoon to discuss it. And it's okay saying we will reach an agreed way forward. What happens if we can't reach an agreed way forward? A decision's already been taken to council. Is that what will be told to the trade unions and the employees? It's already been agreed.
Okay, it's a good point. Thank you. Good point. Back to Mr. Laurie to maybe answer that one.
Yeah, thank you, Provost. Just in terms of the discussions with the trade unions and the process from here, it may be helpful, Provost, to hear from Karen Algie on that.
Okay, delighted. Karen, if you would like to come in on that one, thank you.
Thank you, Provost. Yes, we have met. I meet with the trade unions weekly, and at one of these weekly meetings I have certainly briefed the trade unions on the structure. The trade unions were initially sent a copy of the diagram of the structure chart and have subsequently been sent a copy of the report. So they have had that information. They've had numerous opportunities to come back to me with any comments or questions. And as stated in the report, there is nothing that has come back to date. I have offered the trade unions a further briefing on this, and I've also said to them that I'm happy to meet with them after Council takes a decision today to brief them on that and to seek any feedback from them on that as well. Subject to the consultation, depending on what we get back from the consultation, that would be discussed with the trade unions and would then go back to group leaders as well. And it would be at that stage there would be a decision taken, depending on the substantive nature of any comments, whether they were substantial or not, about where those would go next, and that would be a decision that would be required to be taken. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll go now to a member of the administration. I know Councillor Nimmo's been waiting, but Councillor Bowes, then Councillor Nimmo, then Councillor Nicholl. Councillor Bowes, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Provost. I think the leader, the council alluded to, and maybe Mr. Laurie will maybe want to confirm when I'm done with this. As I understand, a lot of this is operational. In fact, the vast majority of this report that we're looking here at is operational. However, looking at that, when you look at moving asset management and property management together as one team to asset manage and keep all our properties to good standard, it seems right to put them together, because then you've got professionals who deal with that type of work, doing that type of work. When you look at which won't happen obviously till later, the property repair service coming in to environmental and operations. Again, it makes sense. The word synergy has been used quite a lot. I think I used it myself on Monday when we got a presentation from the CEO and Karen. And if you put them in with the front-facing, labour-intensive types of works, you're going to have a number of health and safety matters, PPE, RPE, a lot of that type of work is all going to tie together. It makes sense. The Invest Falkirk division, I think, is vital. To spread that out across a number of services, I think would end up confusing things. And I think the Invest Falkirk is an exceptionally good idea, because as we move forward, and we've all seen the number of projects, including doors and windows, as well as the so-called bigger projects, to have that team as a strong team together, working together and supporting each other, I think just makes sense. Yeah, there's comment of the amount of savings that are going to be in here, and I think that, I don't know how relative that is in the overall, in the budget of things. The splitting up the three parts of the trust and where they've put it, again, makes sense. Growth and investment for culture, arts, museums and parks. Libraries into housing communities, it's a big part of our communities as libraries, so again, it makes sense. And sports and leisure naturally sits with the education side. Maybe I've missed something that others that are struggling with here, and that's fair enough. But I think we've had quite an in-depth presentation on this. I've seen as much as any other member, except for leaders. I understand the leaders may have seen it slightly earlier, but I don't even know that. But in the time that I've seen it, and we had a meeting on Monday on it, maybe it's part of the business side I come from. I can understand what they're doing here. They're trying to make us more efficient, more focused, so that we can get things done quicker and to a better standard, which is going to benefit the council, which will ultimately benefit the people of Falkirk. And so I think we should make this decision and make the decision now.
Okay, Councillor, thanks for your input there. We're now going to go to Councillor Nimmo and then Councillor Nicholl. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Provost, and I'll try and be quick. This is obviously a major report, and it will have huge implications for the council in the future. And I think that was demonstrated by the Chief Executive, where he spoke for over 20 minutes introducing the report. The service restructure, it's not been reviewed by officers overnight. This has been going on for a number of months, and yet it lands on our desks with only a few days' notice. It's just not acceptable. It's not acceptable at all. In fact, it's disgraceful. It just shouldn't be allowed to happen. This should have been made available to all elected members at a much earlier stage, so that we could have been involved in, even if it was just the thought processes that we could have been involved in, would have been a benefit. Now, it's an operational report, yes, I agree with that, but elected members have been involved in operational reports in the past. A number of years ago, we went through a council restructuring process. That was operational. Elected members were fully consulted and involved in that. We've been denied the opportunity to be involved in this. At the end of the day, we've been asked to agree something that we've had absolutely no involvement in. Now, I don't quite understand why one of the previous statements was made. If this is operational, it doesn't have to come before us at council for agreement. So why is it here today in that case? You've got to ask yourself that question as well. it makes more sense to ask for a continuation, bearing in mind that the time spans involved here. We've had very short notice to look into this report, ask questions, or even meet with officers to discuss the ramifications coming from this. And I think the major issues contained in this report need to be subject to proper scrutiny. That's already been mentioned. We're not being allowed to scrutinise this report. We just don't have time. And it's inappropriate, Provost. Thanks, Provost.
Thank you for your input, sir. Councillor Nicholl and then Councillor McCluskey.
Thank you, Provost. The point that I was going to raise, and Gary and Alan have both touched on it, is that I would really like to know just how much of this would never need to come to members in any case. I'm happy that it has, I'm not arguing against that, but I suspect that the vast majority of this really doesn't need member agreement. And could I just have that fleshed out a bit by the Chief Executive? I think he's perhaps sat there thinking that he's made to some extent a rod for his own back by suggesting that everything in this paper needs member approval. 100% sure that it doesn't. But could I just understand from him just what is operational and what specific points need member agreement? And I'll come back to him after that. I would say that I'm fully supportive of moving as quickly as possible to implement these changes. Delay to me doesn't seem sensible at all. I think we all recognise that the council has to be fleeter of foot as we come out of the COVID pandemic. And as far as I'm concerned, the sooner that these are implemented and begin to show the results and benefits, I'm sure they will, the better. The final point I would make, and hopefully the Chief Executive would respond to, whilst I'm in 99% agreement with everything in this paper, there's one thing that I really don't like at all, and that is the name Place Directorate. It's totally meaningless. It just means nothing to people out there. At a time when we're trying to connect with the public, their eyes will just glaze over if they hear that we have a director of place or a place directorate. So I'm just wondering, even if at this late stage, whether he would be open to perhaps taking some suggestions from members or indeed otherwise to replace that. If he can expand on why he thinks place is a good name, then good and well. But I, for one, would certainly need a bit of convincing. I'm just not sure that name couldn't be improved upon, Provost. So if we could hear from the Chief Executive in regard to those points, please.
Oh, okay, thanks for your input. Two interesting points. You heard them, Mr. Lorry. The first one is in the content, what could have been here and what didn't need to be here. And obviously the issue about place, the name place. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. In terms of what requires member decision and what is a matter ultimately for myself as head of paid service and the directors, you can glean that, I guess, from the recommendations. There's some you're asked to note and some you're asked to agree. But to kind of boil it down to its most simple, phase one is about changes within services, and that falls within the purview of officers. So the changes within services do not require member approval. But of course, in terms of bringing forward a broader report, I felt it was important that these changes were set out very clearly for members' information, and also the reasons why we were undertaking these. So in terms of phase one, the only thing which requires member approval is the move of the commissioning and central matching teams into the health and social care partnership. All the other moves within services do not require member approval. By contrast, If you look at phases 2 and 3, so phase 2 is about the integration of the trust. So these are new services in effect coming into the council. And phase 3 is about services moving from one part of the council to another. These do require member approval in the context of the council's standing orders. So that's the distinction between what requires member approval and what can simply be done by officers. But clearly, in the context of a report which was intended to give a full view of the direction of travel, both of these elements are covered. And of course, phase 2 and phase 3 are for implementation in 2022. So they're the latter stages of this process. Just in relation to the term place director, and I did anticipate that there might be questions raised about that today. So in my introduction, I spoke about the place principle. I spoke about issues around about the 20-minute neighbourhood. I spoke about the fact that we need to recognise in moving forward the distinctive and different needs of different communities, and that focus on place and the distinctiveness and the importance of place is the reason behind that that proposal. Is it the most important part of this report? It certainly is not. And I guess members who are don't like the idea of using that name, which I have to say is commonly used across local government in Scotland, that change in title is also a matter for elected members. So it's one that you can take a view on. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you for your responses there. Councillor Nicholl, are you satisfied with that? Can we move on?
We'll have to agree to disagree on the term place, but I accept the point. It's a very minor issue in the scheme of things here. I probably won't end up calling it place anyway. I'll call it location services or something. I'll think of a name for it, which I will use.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your input. Councillor McCluskey, you're mute.
Right, thanks, Provost, for allowing me in. And I certainly didn't agree with calling a service after a fish either. You know, a fish or a street. I mean, that's the way the public look at things, and it's stupid, as I say. But there's nothing in this. I'd like to ask firstly a legal question for Colin. Obviously, in the papers here, and there's no many of them, there's only 19 pages of such an important document. Sometimes we get 200 pages of some that's only for nothing. So it just shows you this is quite a brief document. But what has been passed today? Obviously, the council has a thing called a 6-month rule. So we've mentioned here that that what's going to happen and what we're calling things and that. Then suddenly we get dealt with a 6-month rule, but it's up to members to make decisions what you call it, what we do, and in phases. So I wonder if you could give me a layman's guide or something that I can understand what the 6-month ruling would be, what can be changed, if the decision goes to grant this today, what then is set in stone, what can be spoke about and without the 6-month rule and for there. So I would like to ask that question for Colin first.
Mr. Moody will be with us in a minute. Mr. Moody.
Yes, thank you, Provost. In considering the 6-month rule, the starting point is what is the decision which is being made. So referring back to the comments of the Chief Executive, I think there's a clear distinction in the recommendations in the report between those issues you're being asked to note and those you're being asked to agree. So those you're being asked to agree would form the decisions which are made today if they subsequently become the decision from this morning's meeting. In relation to the 6 months rule, This would prevent further discussion or decision-making on the issues agreed unless there was a material change of circumstances or 2/3 of the membership of the council agreed to reconsider the issue. One caveat I would make to that is the reference to the consultation which exists within the report itself. And as Karen was explaining earlier, if there was a substantive response to the consultation which required further council consideration, then that is a matter which could be brought back before the council and wouldn't offend the 6 months rule because it's anticipated within the decision itself, if indeed the recommendations are reflected in the decision.
Thanks very much for that. Thanks very much for that answer to that. I'll go then on to other things. I've heard a lot of statements here today. Putting things together, one obviously Gary mentioned, sounds great. And then until you talk about, as I say, is the trust getting divided into 3, CLD getting divided into 3. I didn't see that as putting things together, as I say. You know, that's like building something with Lego and taking it apart. We also talk about statutory services, and every year each service comes and they look at non-statutory services to make the cuts. And every year you come up and looking at CLD to go and take it away. Every year it's been coming up the last number of years because it's non-statutory. Now what I see before me in my eyes, and what I'll take it the public will see, is the fact you've got to divide it into 3. And then take a bit away at a time, or just get one service to take it away, or come up with that plan, divide and conquer. And that's what I see, the same as a trust. You know, none of us would agree to go and do certain things. So what we'll do is we'll divide it. And then that way we can pick at things. We've got other strange things come up today. And I find it strange for 2 parties saying the same word, fleet of foot. The last time I heard the expression fleet of foot, it was a boy that had dipped this old lady's purse and ran away. Fleet of foot, you know what I mean? And this is a term we seem to be using in the council today. Where is the fleet of foot on the SPR? This papers have been done in the last few weeks with senior officers. 7 years we've been waiting in the SPR. We're also told about the leader of the council tells us the truth. The leader of the council has told us that she knows what buildings she would keep and what she wouldn't keep. Right, but we've not seen any report. What happened to the fleet of foot there? Because we're talking about moving community centres that in the SPR you want to close. We then we talk about making community halls that was suggested that we dispose of. And obviously the question has come up before about libraries. It's only statutory to have a library service. It doesn't say how many. So is this an opportunity here to get rid of some? And I would feel far more confident if this was put back until after an SPR meeting, till we find we're going to move buildings we don't even know is going to be there. Right. So I'm very concerned over it. And then we go into other obviously, you know, in the papers here, you've got 416, 423, that's the ones about housing. And we talk about putting place, we talk about putting the culture into this place service. I find it strange. One thing I knew about Miss Campbell, you could go and speak to her. You know, I travel all over and watch ballet and different types of dance and whole host of things and strange beliefs, because we're all different into what we like, what we believe culture is. Other people believe Gaelic's the main thing, or opera, or poetry, or whatever. I do not see Douglas has been an expert that I can converse with culture. I may be wrong. Maybe, as I say, maybe it has been in before part of a ballet school and that, and about. But I don't know. But I had confidence in Mrs. Campbell. So we're putting services to people. where we're just not sure of it, and sometimes it's further information, and that's why we're asking for the delay. Housing services, my last point, housing services, right, if when public see this, that CLD is going to housing, that could be a great thing. Now, I know that it'll not be, we're not allowed to go there and pay for the cleaners in the CLD and the key holders and different people and that to be rent payers pay. I pay £87 a week. But what I'm saying is I know that we're not allowed to use public rents and to go and do other services. But that information's not here. It's not here for the tenants associations, for the members of the public who would be saying, what's happening here? Is that my rent is paying here? Because that boy next door, he bought his house, so is he no paying for the community centre? Simple
John, can
questions.
you wind up, please?
Aye, so thanks, Greer. I'm only saying there's a lot of simple questions here that members of the public, and we're trade unions who are meeting this afternoon. I've heard the one-stop steward jumping up and down in anger, the fact that members allowed this, and I only got told last week. So as I say, I'm concluded that, Provost, and thanks for your indulgence.
No, thank you for your input, sir. But the time is for members is 4 minutes, and we're allowing a wee bit, obviously, because of this major decision, and allowing people 7 and 8 minutes just to conclude. It's now an opportunity for Councillor Murtagh, followed by Councillor Goldie. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Murtagh.
I'll certainly not take 7 minutes, I do promise that. I just wanted to, as I'm sure that Councillor Meikle-John in her summing up will pick up on many of the points, particularly the last one made by Councillor McCluskey, because there has been consultation that's clear within the report. But I just wanted to speak in favour of, I think that place and placemaking is a very important part of our general direction as local government, and is quite common, and I don't have a problem from that point of view with place and placemaking, although maybe it's something we're not used to it here, but I think it is a very minor point. But I just, on the back of that, I just do want to say that, as has been the case in previous things, that officers have come with recommendations to us, and I know that we are obviously got to consider them carefully, and I feel uncomfortable sitting in a meeting when members describe officers' proposals as stupid and other remarks in such ways, because I don't think that's appropriate. So I just wanted to make that point, because I think that whether we disagree or not, that's not appropriate in a full council meeting. Thank you.
Okay, point taken. Councillor Goldie. You need to unmute, sir.
First of all, I would need to say that whilst I listened to John at great length, I think all sides, Conservatives, Independents, Labour and SNP, have in the past few years treated CLD abysmally. It's been the first thing to get slashed at every turn, and we're going to be doing it again. And I agree on that point with John. They are a very important job in the community, as we all know. The other thing, of course, the other danger that I see here is the job evaluation system. Because when we start to put departments together and start to move people into post, quite rightly, people are entitled again to say, well, I think my job and a job evaluation system now would be higher ranked than that particular job there. We had a situation some years back where the chief executive and the director of law indicated they would withdraw and go on strike because of a job evaluation system. I'm looking at Colin Moody at the minute. I don't suspect you would do that at the minute, but it just shows you somebody was moved up in a department. I think it was, can't remember, it was in planning somewhere, it was moved up and finished up being higher paid than the chief executive. So it became quite a conflict, and you have to be very wary, and I would be wary in this particular instance. If when departments come together, I think these kind of problems are. My biggest fear at the minute, and my biggest concern at the minute, I'm greatly disappointed. If I could ask Karen Algie, am I right when I say they do not have an agreement with the trade union at the minute?
Karen?
Thank you, Provost. it's not an agreement as such, Councillor Goldie. No, we don't. It's an opportunity for the trade unions to still feed back as part of the consultation process that's outlined in the report.
Thank you.
Well, again, that's I appreciate that. And so does that mean that we're seeking an agreement, or we're not going to bother with an agreement?
Karen, you
say
want to
it's
come
not
back
an
in that
agreement?
one?
Yes, thank you. For something such as a structure change, we wouldn't need a collective agreement with the trade unions. It would be through consultation to get us to a position where hopefully they will agree. But if there are, as I said earlier, if there are matters of substance that would require further consideration, those would come back for discussion with trade unions and group leaders. And as Colin has said, if they were of substance, they could come back to council if that was required.
Yeah, well,
thank you.
In essence, Provost, and with great respect to Karen, that tells me that there's a probability of trouble there because we haven't got a signed agreement. But anyway, so that's my concerns. CLD, job evaluation, time will tell, but the fact that we haven't got an agreement with the trade unions is a real concern. But thanks for that, Provost.
No, thank you for your input, sir. We'll now go to Councillor Munro. Councillor Munro, thank you.
Thank you, Provost. I do agree that this is a complex report which seeks to match our structure to the new corporate plan, which emphasises community, enterprise and innovation, and this additional aspiration that we need to be able to deliver real change with less funds for communities. And so it's not just about structure, it's also about cultural change and public perception. And these are the difficult things. We need changes in listening and facilitating to meet the community needs on the ground. And one of the things that you were involved with last week, Provost, was the perception that somebody expressed on television about the state of our town centre. And it's things like how our high street looks that really matter to our communities. And these things need to be at the forefront of officers' minds. And part of this report isn't the structural element, it's getting that change of emphasis towards this new structural plan and to focus on communities. And CLD exemplify the importance of being close to communities because they help get up and running those food banks and facilities and new teams and community groups, which were instrumental over the last year in delivering all these new things that were necessary during COVID. So I think if we're not to have place, maybe we should have a community rather than a place service, because it's a community service we want that reflects the things we need in our communities on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your input. Is there no other hands up? We'll go back to Councillor Meiklejohn to wind up before we go to the vote.
Thank you, Provost. I'm going to try and not take up too much time because
Excuse me, Provost. Provost, I've had my hand up for ages.
I haven't seen you, Councillor Reid, but we'll let you right in. Sorry about that. We have.
It's showing up on the screen.
That's the first I've seen you. Thank you. Councillor Reid. Sorry, Councillor Meiklejohn. Apologies, Councillor Reid.
Yes, my apologies to Councillor Meiklejohn for interrupting as well. I think, as happens often in this council, we come within a whisker of agreeing only if they end up disagreeing. I think there are broader issues involved here, and one is the very democracy within which we live, which dictates that the role of elected members is entirely separate from that of councillors. And I agree with the points alluded to by Councillor Nicholl and Councillor Bowes. It's entirely the prerogative of the Chief Executive to bring forward recommendations, few of which will be subject to our agreement. We also miss the broader point of the The project's listed in 4.18, where Falkirk stands on the edge of very exciting things about to happen, some of which I may not see, some of which I may, but certainly over the next decade, it's going to be an exciting place in which to live. However, I have to support a group amendment, not because it's coming from a group necessarily, but would point out from the agenda promised the minutes of Council 2nd December 2020, 20th of January 2021, 24th of February 2021, 3rd of March 2021, 11th of March 2021, and the one today, 24th March 2021. So we've had council meetings almost every 3 weeks over the last 2 months. So I don't think what's been asked for in the amendment is too much to ask for, Provost. And we suggest that a collegiate approach is taken on this particular issue. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor, and I apologise for not seeing you there. So we'll go back to Councillor Meikle-John now, unless there's anybody else wanting in at this stage. Councillor Meikle-John, wind up and then we'll go to the vote. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Provost. Everybody has had the information in front of them, and group leaders did have early sight of it, and they had the opportunity to, with the structures, to see that, and therefore saw that at a much earlier stage in the development. And obviously there was discussions with Kenneth through the group leaders as well. My own group and the Conservative group have had an opportunity to come to a conclusion on that. I have no more privileges than any other member. Any member can go to speak to any department, head of service, director, whatever. But I do know that our teams in development services have been doing a massive amount of work throughout the pandemic, but they also recognise that they are going to be key to the recovery programme, and the resources that are needed to be realigned there in order to ensure that they can take forward the projects that Councillor Reid has just highlighted there, which will set our direction for the future. And by delaying that even further and allowing the changes to happen will actually impact on the timescales of that first phase of delivery of this programme. And I appreciate some of the comments that others have made, but having had the experience of this council over the last 5 years, and previously the previous administration, that it does feel like delay for delay's sake. That therefore I don't understand why they can't see that bigger picture, the vision, the strategic nature of taking those decisions and being able to move forward. I think there's a number of red herrings in there, and we've seen that there's obviously a hurt, and I can understand that, regards to the community trust with the Labour group, and they want to keep revisiting that and not accept that we have to move on. And in moving the trust back into council, it was never ever going to be coming back as a single entity. As I said previously, then there wouldn't be any point of changing the trust, and there wouldn't be the ability to make any savings whatsoever. And we need to actually look at where the synergies, and which is a word that's been used a lot today, and the connectivity within the council services that we have, that can actually make things better and improve on where we are, because that was one of the reasons we took the decision to do what we did. So I think it'd be much better to actually accept that we've moved on and start to work on the consultation that has to take place with the trust about where it then sits within the council structure. And again, I just feel that that's a red herring and it's a bit of a delay tactic. Discussions with the trade unions, the way we've approached this with the trade unions as a council management is no different to any other restructure that would happen. We don't need a signed agreement, but we want to work collaboratively with the trade unions, and our partnership working with the trade unions needs to develop, and that's happening. But as Karen said, she has at least regular weekly meetings with the trade unions. There's far more engagement. I know that the trade unions have been in touch with each of the political groups and met with each of the political groups, certainly from my own perspective, that was very positive, and being able to have those discussions. So we're not doing anything different than what we would do at any other time and has been done in the past. For my sins, as deputy leader of the SNP group in COSLA, I sit in the SGC at COSLA, and we have the same process through the pay negotiations there until we get to an agreement. We're talking about a phase programme. It's a phase programme over 18 months. We start today, it goes all the way through to December 2022. That is has the ability to be able to manage that change programme, work through any issues that arise and come to an agreement. But if we start to put doubt in the minds of the public, doubt in the minds of our staff about our strength of commitment to actually modernising this council, that is when this will continue to fail. And we cannot allow that to happen. And I believe that by being able to instruct management to take things forward now, that we have a head of steam can be built up in order to be able to start to make the changes we need to make to modernise our council and be a council of the future. And whether we all like it or not, it's something we have to do. Therefore, I'm going to move the recommendations in the report that allows us to move forward, Provost.
Okay, thank you for your summary there. We'll go to Mr. Moody, who's going to take the vote.
Yes, thank you, Provost. The motion consists of the recommendations in paragraph 2 of the Chief Executive's report, and that motion is moved by Councillor Meiklejohn and seconded by Councillor Garner, against which there is an amendment moved by Councillor Bissett and seconded by Councillor Coombs to continue consideration of the report to the next council meeting. Provost Buchanan.
Amendment.
Deputy Provost Ritchie.
Motion.
Go again,
Amendment.
Councillor Alexander.
Motion.
Councillor Balfour.
The motion.
Councillor Binney.
Motion.
Councillor Bissett.
Amendment.
Councillor Black.
Amendment.
Councillor Blackwood.
Amendment.
Councillor Bowes.
Motion.
Councillor Coleman.
Motion.
Councillor Colley.
Motion.
Councillor Coombs.
Amendment.
Councillor Flynn.
Motion.
Councillor Garner.
The motion.
Councillor Goldie.
Amendment.
Councillor Grant.
The motion.
Councillor Harris.
For the motion.
Councillor Hughes.
For the motion.
Councillor Kerr.
For the motion.
Councillor McHugh.
For the motion.
Councillor McCluckie.
Amendment.
Councillor Meiklejohn.
For the motion.
Councillor Monroe.
For the motion.
Councillor Murtagh.
Motion.
Councillor Nicholl.
The motion.
Councillor Nimmo.
Amendment.
Councillor Patrick.
The motion.
Councillor Reid.
The amendment.
And Councillor Spears.
Motion.
Provost, there are 20 votes for the motion, there are 10 votes for the amendment, and the motion is carried.
Thank you for that, Mr. Moody. That takes us to item 6 on your agenda this morning, appointments and programme of meetings. It's pages 67 to 71 on your agenda papers, and it's Mr. Moody. Thank you, Mr. Moody.
Yes, thank you very much, Provost. And this report deals with 4 issues, which I propose to deal with discreetly. Those issues are 3 appointments to be made by the Council, and the final issue is a recommendation in relation to the next ordinary meeting of Council, with a request that that is moved from 5th of May to 18th of May to take account of the date of the Scottish Parliament elections. But Provost, I'll turn first to the first of the appointments referred to, and that is the appointment to Forth Valley Health Board. Each health board requires to have a member who is a councillor from each of the local authorities covered by the health board area. That appointment is ordinarily made for the life of the council term at the statutory meeting of council. And I think council will recall that Councillor Black was appointed at the last statutory meeting. As noted in the report, Councillor Black has stood down from membership of the health board, and that accordingly creates a vacancy which the council requires to make a nomination to, and that nomination will be for the remainder of the council term. The nomination is then made to the health boards, transmitted to the Scottish ministers, who formalise the appointment. So, Provost, I don't propose to say anything more in relation to the health board unless there are any questions in relation to that, and otherwise it would be a matter of calling for nominations.
Okay, before we go into the nominations, I'll give an opportunity for Councillor Black to say a few words. Thank you, Councillor Black.
Thank you, Provost. That's much appreciated. I'd just like firstly to thank the councillors who voted for me to go on the board. It's been a real honour and a privilege to be the council rep on the health board. It's been a great experience and it's meant a lot. And I think for many reasons, firstly because I was a former staff nurse, and I think Cecil, Robert and Nigel will appreciate that because I'm sure they have a close affinity with the NHS as well. But more than that, I was on the Community Health Partnership for many years, and then I've been on the IGB for 7 years. And I knew some of the staff and directors to say hello to, but I didn't. It was a real revelation to get to know them and see their commitment and dedication to the people of Forth Valley firsthand. So the last year has been a really awful one for everyone, but especially for staff working in the NHS and the care sector. When the staff did their training, they never ever realised they would work during a pandemic, the like of what we've seen with COVID-19. And everyone played their part, gave 100%, and even through a camera lens and in a Microsoft Teams meeting, I can see how hard the last year's been. But the management team have led from the front and have been highly visible throughout the pandemic. And I know that my small contribution to the board has been appreciated. I was told several times that they were glad to have me because I asked plenty of tough questions and I was good at scrutiny. I think I've learned really well in the council over many years. So building relationships on the board was really important to me, as we all had to play a part in helping integration to go to the next stage. And I found that the board members, the staff and the directors to be very welcoming, inclusive and hard-working. And I'm really sad to leave the board because it truly was one of the highlights of my career so far as a councillor, and I learned a lot. I was really appreciative to be asked to be the mental health champion. And when I was the mental health champion, I visited most of the services and that directorate, from the older people's services in Cookmanshire down to visiting the staff in Pullman young offenders. And the staff are what makes the NHS. From the ward cleaners to the senior clinicians, they give their all, day in, day out, despite staff shortages and difficulties in recruitment, an issue that affects all the NHS boards. Those difficulties in recruitment and retention are one of the biggest issues faced in the NHS and social care, because strong and efficient teams are what helps make the NHS great. And as a nation, we need to make sure that we train more staff and to get more nurses and doctors after the pandemic. And it's so good to see that more people are coming forward that want to become nurses now. So that's me, Provost. I just would like to say, I hope the next person that goes on the board enjoys it as much as I have, because it's been a great experience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Black. On behalf of myself and the council, we recognise the hard work you did during your time on the board. Just like to thank you very much. Move back to Colin now to take on nominations.
Yes, Provost, it's simply a matter of nominations coming from the floor to the position.
Councillor Meikle-John.
Thank you, Provost. I just want to begin to thank Alison for her time on the Health Board. Her knowledge, skills from her previous involvement have been invaluable, and it's not been without its challenges over the years, but she's been that critical link between the Health Board and the IGIB. Without that link, the Health Board and IGIB would not be able to make the progress in our integration of our health and social care to the point that we would not have been in such a good position with our partnership to have delivered the huge contribution that they've made during the response to the pandemic. What it has demonstrated is there's real tangible benefits of having that dual role of having a member of our IGIB on the Health Board. And it's that very critical stage in the development of our IGIB and the response and the recovery have some way to have someone with knowledge and understanding in order to be able to develop that further as we learn the lessons and come out the other side of the pandemic. Last week, we saw many tributes paid to Councillor Colley and to her abilities, all very much appreciated, but more importantly, very well deserved. I believe she has done a fantastic job since taking up her role, recognising that anyone new in joining the Health Board at this time at a council term, and critically as we move from responding to post-pandemic recovery, that Fiona's role as a chair, she's already worked very closely with the Health Board, and that she would provide that much needed continuity at this time, as well as being a great advocate to ensure that the best needs of Falkirk citizens are represented through the Health Board and are joined up with that of the partnership. Therefore, I believe that Councillor Colley would be the best person to take up the position of Forth Valley Health Board. And I hope again today that as we saw last week, her abilities were recognised across the chamber. I therefore nominate Councillor Colley.
Thank you very much. We'll go to Councillor Bissett. Is there any nominations from his group?
Thanks, Convener. I'd personally like to say a personal thanks to Alison for her work on the Health Board. I mean, she's been, having worked in the NHS, I know what it's like. It's like a massive battleship. Trying to move it in any direction is very difficult. And I certainly know for the feedback I've had that she's been an excellent advocate for the council on the Health Board and for the people she represents on the Health Board. And I certainly know that Alison's influence on the IGB is sort of beginning to pull that together, and maybe one day we'll see a full integration. So I'd just like to say my personal thanks to Alison for her time on the board. And she's been a valued member of the board, I know that, and certainly the feedback she gave to the Labour group on different reports and tried to take a balanced view was commendable. So thanks very much, Alison, for your contribution. We would like to nominate Councillor Alan Nimmo for this role. Alan's got a passion about this and he'd really like to get stuck in about it and do whatever he can. He feels it's a role that he could really step up to the plate and deliver something for the council on it. And so we'd like to nominate Councillor Nimmo. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. We'll go to Councillor Kerr to see if he had any nominations from his group.
Like the previous speakers, Provost, our group would like to thank Alison for the hard work and dedication that she has done in this role. It's been a very challenging time, as everybody says, through this pandemic, and there was never a doubt that she would give her 100% to that role when she was elected in 2017. So on behalf of the Conservative and Unionist group, I'd like to thank you, Alison. We haven't got a nomination, Provost.
Okay, thank you. That makes it simpler. Go back to Mr. Moody.
Yes, thank you, Provost. I'll just read through the sedation and ask councillors to indicate whether their vote is for Councillor Colley or Councillor Nimmo. Provost Buchanan.
Councillor Colley.
Deputy Provost Ritchie.
Councillor Colley.
Councillor Aitchison.
Councillor Nimmo.
Councillor Alexander.
Come on, David.
Mute David.
I'll come back to Councillor Alexander. Councillor Balfour.
Councillor Colley.
Councillor Binney.
Councillor Colley.
Councillor Bissett.
Councillor Nimmo.
Councillor Black.
Councillor Nimmo.
Councillor Blackwood.
Councillor Nimmo.
Councillor Bowes.
Councillor Colley.
Councillor Coleman.
Councillor Colley.
Councillor Colley.
Councillor Colley.
Councillor Coombs.
Councillor Nimmo.
Councillor Flynn.
Councillor Colley.
Councillor Garner.
My ward colleague, Councillor Colley.
Councillor Goldie.
Councillor Nimmo.
Councillor Grant.
Councillor Colley.
Councillor Harris.
Councillor Colley.
Councillor Hughes.
Councillor Colley.
Councillor Kerr.
Councillor Colley.
Councillor McHugh.
Councillor Colley.
Councillor McCluckie.
Councillor Nimmo.
Councillor Meiklejohn.
Councillor Colley.
Councillor Monroe.
Councillor Colley.
Councillor Murtagh.
Councillor Colley.
Councillor Nicholl.
Councillor Colley.
Councillor Nimmo.
Councillor Nimmo.
Councillor Patrick.
Councillor Colley.
Councillor Reid.
Councillor Nimmo.
Councillor Spears.
Councillor Colley.
And I'll come back to Councillor Alexander.
Councillor Colley, and apologies.
Thank you. Provost, there are 21 votes for Councillor Colley. There are 9 votes for Councillor Nimmo, and Councillor Colley is accordingly nominated to the post.
Congratulations.
Provost, I turn now to the appointment of Vice Chair of the Integration Joint Board. The Chair and the Vice Chair of the Integration Joint Board rotate between the Health Board and the Council in relation to their appointment, and the 2-year term as Chair of the Integration Joint Board as appointed by the Council has ended, and it's now the Council's opportunity to appoint the Vice Chair. The appointment requires to be made from one of the 3 members of the Integration Joint Board, who are Councillors Meiklejohn, Colley and Black. So at that stage, Provost, I think it would be appropriate for a nomination to be made.
Okay, nominations. Councillor Meiklejohn.
Thank you, Provost. And to enable the continuity again within the IJB, I would nominate Councillor Colley for the position as Vice Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Bissett.
Thanks, Provost. It's a fairly straightforward thing that happens in this case, so we'd be happy to support Councillor Colley on that rotation.
Okay.
That's Councillor Kerr.
Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, Provost. It's just unfortunate that our group isn't represented on the IJB because we feel it's a very important position, but obviously we've not got a nomination. We're quite happy for Councillor Colley.
Okay, thank you. Back to Mr. Moody.
Thank you, Provost. That is then agreed as the Council's appointment of Vice Chair of the IJB, Councillor Colley.
Congratulations.
Provost, I turn now to the 3rd issue of appointment, and that is firstly the question of considering creating an older people's champion, and then if so agreed to appoint a councillor to that position. And the report from paragraph 3.5 onwards sets out some of the background to this. This is something which has been raised with the Council by Age Scotland and the Scottish Older People's Assembly. And that report sets out some further information on the role of an older people's champion within the Council. and members can see, Provost, that the older people are defined in this particular role as those aged 50 or over.
Okay. We'll have a go for nominations. Councillor Meikle-John.
Thank you, Provost. Just in agreeing that we should consider nominating an older people's champion, I just want to give a bit of context. I think older people can often be underrepresented as part of our engagement in designing and services. But we're all supporting our communities become more digitally connected. There's a significant section of our older people who can't or don't want to engage in this way. We already know that loneliness and isolation, particularly in older people, is an issue. This last year has magnified that for very many older people, making them far more vulnerable. And as we start to come out of that isolation bubble, many will have been affected in the longer term. That will need to be something that we, along with other statutory partners, will need to address in order to maintain their independence. Therefore, it is in keeping with our empowering communities, which includes communities of interest. We need to work with older people to identify and design solutions to support our older community and keep them well and active. In nominating Councillor Lorna Binney, I would say Lorna is a very caring, compassionate person and a good listener. Her pleasant disposition helps put people at their ease and will enable her to have an open and meaningful engagement with our older population, something that is going to be so important as we look to helping people through the recovery phase of their lives following such a difficult time during the pandemic. Lorna will bring her knowledge and personal skills from her professional working life as well as her councillor role and her life experience, and be able to use that intelligence to help ensure that their voices are heard and their needs are taken into account in policy and service development. Lorna will not just be a champion for older people, but a true ambassador. I therefore nominate Lorna to the position. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you very much for your nomination. Councillor Bissett.
Thank you, Provost. I was glad to see this coming on the agenda. I think it's something that gets overlooked, is the help that we need to give to older people, especially in isolation and vulnerable, and maybe don't know who to ask to reach out to. And I think we need someone that's got bags of experience working with people, and quite clearly somebody that knows how to engage with people and has engaged with community groups over many, many years. So in this instance, I would like to nominate Councillor Dennis Goldie for this role. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kerr, have you got a nomination, sir?
We have not, Provost, but I think 50 is the new 40. I don't think that 50 should be done as old. But no, Provost, we haven't got any nominations.
Okay, then that simplifies it. We'll go to Mr. Moody.
Yes, thank you, Provost, and it's the same process as before. Provost Buchanan.
Councillor Goldie.
Deputy Provost Ritchie.
Councillor Binney.
Councillor Aitchison.
Councillor Goldie.
Councillor Alexander.
Councillor Binney.
Councillor Balfour.
Councillor Binney.
Councillor Binney.
Councillor Binney.
Councillor Bissett.
Councillor Goldie.
Councillor Black.
Councillor Goldie.
Councillor Blackwood.
Councillor Goldie.
Councillor Bowes.
Councillor Binney.
Councillor Coleman.
Councillor Binney.
Councillor Colley.
Councillor Binney.
Councillor Coombs.
Councillor Goldie.
Councillor Flynn.
Councillor Goldie.
Councillor Garner.
Councillor Binney.
Councillor Goldie.
Councillor Goldie.
Councillor Grant.
Councillor Goldie.
Councillor Harris.
Councillor Goldie.
Councillor Hughes.
Councillor Binney.
Councillor Kerr.
Goldie.
Councillor McHugh.
Councillor Binney.
Councillor McCluckie.
Councillor Goldie.
Councillor Meikle-John.
Councillor Binney.
Councillor Monroe.
Councillor Goldie.
Councillor Murtagh.
Councillor Binney.
Councillor Nicholl.
Councillor Goldie.
Councillor Nimmo.
Councillor Goldie.
Councillor Patrick.
Councillor Goldie.
Councillor Reid.
Councillor Goldie.
And Councillor Spears.
Councillor Binney.
Provost, there are 13 votes for Councillor Binney, there are 17 votes for Councillor Goldie, and Councillor Goldie is accordingly appointed to the position.
Congratulations, sir. We now move on to item 4. Is move the council meeting the 5th of May to 18th of May, and we'll go back to Mr. Moody.
Yes, Provost, thank you. And the circumstances here are set out in the report. It's, I think, a reflection of the fact that the Scottish Parliament election is scheduled for the following day, and the circumstances around the election this time, I think, are particularly pressing because of the current COVID situation. So the suggestion is that it would be prudent to move the council meeting so that it's not taking place the day before the council meeting itself, and an alternative date is identified in the recommendation.
Are members happy with that, or does anybody like to come in on it? We all happy?
Happy to agree.
Agreed. Thank you very much. That takes us to item 7, the Local Government Scotland Act 2004, Remuneration Amendment Regulations 2021, pages 72 to 75 on your agenda papers. Mr. Moody.
Yes, thank you, Provost. And this is a report which comes to the council each year at around this time, and it follows on from a change in the regulations which apply to the remuneration of councillors each year, which operates by law 2 of the categories of allowance which are paid, and that is for ordinary councillors and also for leaders of councillors. And it's maybe worth setting out by, as a matter of background, that that uplift is based on a formula, and it's based on the annual increase in the median annual earnings of public sector workers in Scotland each year. So that is the basis of the 4.2% that appears in the change to the regulations. But there are 2 categories where there is still a decision for the council to make, and that is in relation to the provost and in relation to senior councillors. Each year when this has happened, almost without exception, the council has taken the decision to apply the same percentage increase that is given to ordinary councillors and the leader of the council to those other positions. So I'm suggesting to you today that there may be merit in agreeing in this report that that is the process which applies from now on, without the need for this report to come to you at this time each year.
Thank you. I'll go to the leader of the council for her views.
Thank you, Provost. As has been said by Mr. Moody, this award is made by an independent government body and not decided by this council or indeed any council. It's automatic to ordinary councillors. Therefore, I would suggest, in the interest of equity, I believe that senior councillors, get my teeth back in, who have additional responsibility shouldn't be disadvantaged. This funding doesn't affect frontline services, nor is it considered part of the council budget. Therefore, it's not going to disadvantage our citizens. This year has been challenging for everyone, our councillors too, and our workload across the board has been significantly greater. Therefore, I would propose that we agree to increase the portfolio holders, provost, senior councillors in line with the leader and other councillors. In relation to the statutory award coming before us every year, I can only remember one occasion in the last 14 years of being any deviation from that. therefore on that basis, the principal has been awarded every year. Therefore, it would make sense to consider the automatic award. Many authorities already do so. However, it's not one that I would die in the ditch over. If there's a consensus that we do review it every year, that's fair enough. But I would be happy that if members were content that it is just automatically paid to provost and senior councillors, as it is to the ordinary councillors at the time of the pay award.
Thank you. Have you got a second there?
Provost Councillor Garner. Yes, I fully agree with the wording the council leader said there, and in relation to 2.13. So I'm happy to second the recommendations.
Thank you. Has any of the other group leaders got any input at this moment? Are everybody happy to agree?
Robert?
Councillor Nimmo?
Councillor Bissett?
It's just really
Councillor Bissett. Sorry, Councillor Bissett.
Thanks, Provost. The recommendations are, certainly the pay rise is set independently, as you stated, and we don't have any control over that. And certainly, regarding the sort of openness and transparency, I would like to put forward an amendment that this report does come to the council every year, that it becomes a public document and that people are aware of it. So I don't think it should be hidden out of view. I think it's something that should be in full view. And so I would move that it stays as it is, Provost.
Okay, have we got a seconder for Councillor Bissett's amendment?
I'm happy to second.
Thank you.
I'm just going to. I was just going to formally second. Thanks, Provost.
Thank you very much. I'll go to Councillor Kerr. Has he got a supplementary agenda? Is he quite happy with what's came forward?
We're no really bothered, Provost. We're happy with it. The first two recommendations, whether that comes back or no, we're no really.
Right.
No real interest today.
That's fair enough. Okay,
Either
Mr.
way.
And Councillor Nimmo, sorry, sir. I forgot about Councillor Nimmo. Councillor Nimmo,
Yep, thanks, Provost. Just as an aside, and it's maybe a question for Colin to answer. I would like to know if there's an option for elected members to opt out of taking the pay rise. I know individual members make whatever financial donations to various charities, but that's a personal option for them. I would like to think that there was an option built into whatever the structure is here for individual members to opt out of accepting a pay rise. Can Colin maybe comment on that?
Yep, thank you.
You're on mute, Colin.
You're on mute, Colin.
Thank you. Councillor Nimmo's point is whether there is an individual option for councillors to opt out of the increase. My view is that there isn't such an option. The amount is fixed in law and it's there for the councillors to take. So no, there isn't an individual bargaining element in this.
Okay, that answers your question. Councillor Goldie wants to.
Yeah, it's just on a quick point, Provost. The term's been used twice, ordinary councillors. I don't think there are any ordinary councillors. I think we would do a very difficult job. There are portfolio holders, and there's a provost, and there's a council leader. But I think it's a bit an unfortunate term to say to people, oh, you're just ordinary councillors.
Yep. Your point's well taken, sir. Councillor Blackwood.
Yeah, sorry, I don't necessarily agree with Councillor Nimmo. Individual councillors should take the increase because the increase is to the post, not to the individual. However, I take on board what he says, and personally, I feel a bit embarrassed about receiving a 4.2 increase in the current pandemic situation where many people are furloughed and many people, when the furlough scheme finishes, will be unemployed. So I will personally be donating the increase to Strathcarron Hospice at the beginning of April when I first receive it. So that'll be my move. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Blackwood. As been stated, every councillor has an opportunity to donate this rise to anybody that they like. It's a matter of their own choice. Okay, and anybody else before we go to the vote? There's a motion moved and seconded, and we have an amendment moved and seconded. No, Mr. Moody.
Thank you, Provost. The motion is moved by Councillor Meiklejohn and seconded by Councillor Garner, and that is effectively to apply all three of the recommendations. And the amendment by Councillor Bissett and seconded by Councillor Coombs doesn't agree with the third recommendation, which would have the result of the report coming back in this form each year. Provost Buchanan.
I'll go with the amendment.
Deputy Provost Ritchie.
The motion.
Councillor Aitchison.
Amendment.
Councillor Alexander.
Motion.
Councillor Balfour.
The motion.
Councillor Binney.
Motion.
Councillor Bissett.
Amendment.
Councillor Black.
Amendment.
Councillor Blackwood.
Amendment.
Councillor Bowes.
Motion.
Councillor Coleman.
The motion.
Councillor Colley.
Motion.
Councillor Coombs.
The amendment.
Councillor Flynn.
The motion.
Councillor Garner.
The motion.
Councillor Goldie.
Amendment.
Councillor Grant.
The motion.
Councillor Harris.
For the motion.
Councillor Hughes.
The motion.
Councillor Kerr.
For the motion.
Councillor McHugh.
For the motion.
Councillor McCluskey.
Amendment.
Councillor Meiklejohn.
For the motion.
Councillor Monroe.
For the motion.
Councillor Murtagh.
Motion.
Councillor Nicholl. Did you hear anything?
Apologies. For the motion.
Councillor Nimmo.
Amendment.
Councillor Patrick.
For the motion.
Councillor Reid.
For the amendment.
And Councillor Spears.
Motion.
Provost, there were 20 votes for the motion. There were 10 votes for the amendment. The motion is carried.
Thank you very much. That takes us to the last item on the agenda. Item 8, execution of deeds, pages 76 to 79 on your agenda papers.
Yes, thank you, Provost. I don't propose to say anything about this report. It's for noting only, but I will try and answer any questions which members have.
Any questions arising? Can we agree? Agreed? Thank you. Now, before everybody goes away, could I just say two areas? First of all, I would like to thank the group leaders, the three group leaders, for the respect shown yesterday at the education in relation to Reflection Day. Thank you very much. The second point, and it's really good news, is that we had a young man that won the Voice who came from Falkirk, young Craig, who won the Voice, and we'd just like to congratulate him. And also, it was wonderful that we had a young boy from Denny. It was went through the final stages as well, Cameron Ledwidge. So there are two young men from Falkirk here. They've got wonderful futures, and we'd just like to wish them all the best. Thank you very much, and thank you for your consideration at the meeting today. Thank you very much.
Well done, Provost.
Thank you, Provost.